Good morning, Life Spring.
Good morning.
It's great to be with you as always. So we've been talking about Darwin, right? And we've been kind of joking that Darwin's dead. But what we've been doing is we've been exploring what a massive impact he's had. And we're feeling it today, even though some people might not be aware of it. He was a biologist that has had an impact in every field because he gave us a philosophy that was totally embraced in every field. And so every conflict you can think of on our cultural basis, every stress and tension, every bit of strife we have in our culture right now over issues, we can trace back to Darwin. They have Darwin at its roots. And so he's an incredibly influential person. But after 160 years, we have no proof. There's no evidence. And that's what we saw last week. We saw that, hey, they hoped, they wished, they dreamed, and they do a lot of hand waving and smoke and mirrors, and they do a lot of misrepresentation, but there's really no proof for Darwin. It's all just not there, and it was expected to be there. And so Darwin was influential. There's no proof. But what's been happening that a lot of people aren't aware of it is this. There's a growing mound of evidence that points to intelligent design. So just the opposite of what Darwin was looking for, we're starting to discover. And it seems the closer we look, the more detailed we become, the more evidence just mounts up. And so today what I want to do is I want to give you some of this information. You probably won't hear other places because, hey, you're really not allowed to talk about it, but we will talk about it, and I will show you this stuff, and it'll be stuff you can share with your kids and stuff you can share with your friends, and it'll be this just growing realization that what you believe, if you're a creationist, you believe God made everything, what you believe is reasonable. That God left his fingerprints all over what he made, and surprise, surprise, we're finding them there. So I want to start today with a Bible verse, as always, because you always start in Scripture, and I want to go to John, because John has this unique way of starting his gospel, and this is what he says. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And if you go farther in the text, beyond what I give you today, he's going to give away, right, who the Word is, and it's Jesus. So when he says, "In the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God," is what he's saying. But what's really important here is the word. He's chosen this word, and it has deeper meaning than just meaning word. And it means reason or rationality. So it can mean intellect or intelligence. So think about that. In the beginning was this intelligence, and the intelligence was with God, and that intelligence was God. He was with God in the beginning. And notice this is something a lot of Christians miss. All things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been made, that has been created. A lot of people miss that. A lot of people think God the Father's the creator. Now, he's the mastermind. He's the designer. It's all his plan. But when it was carried out, Jesus is the one that actually spoke all things into existence. And so when you go back to Genesis and you read day one, God said, "Let there be," that God there in the Godhead is Jesus, the Son, speaking all things into existence. So all things were created by him and for him, the Bible tells us in another place. But here it says that all things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created, because you have to account for God, because God wasn't created. So the only thing not created was God, but God did the creation, and notice it's Jesus doing it, and Jesus is called the Word, which can mean reason, rationality, or intelligence. And this is the incredible thing I want you to see. God is brilliant. I don't know what your IQ is, if you've ever taken an IQ test, but if you have a 150 IQ, you're seriously gifted. I mean, you got some brain power on you. And we would consider you kind of genius-like. You would be like, wow, he's sharp, he's smart. You be a part of Mensa or whatever. And God's IQ is like 1 million. God is so far beyond our intellect. It's like he's able to do things at a whole other level that we can't imagine. And that's why we struggle. Because we make assumptions based on how we think versus how he thinks, because we can't even imagine how he thinks. And that's why the Bible says, lean not on your own understanding, right? Because your understanding is insignificant to his. He is an intellect beyond all intellects. And think about it. Before all time, he had on the drawing board, he had a hippopotamus. And he had a hippopotamus down to all the systems and how it was going to look, how the cells were going to act, it's going to live in the water. And he had that for every animal, in a sense. He had all the trees mapped out. He had all the cell biology worked out, the biochemistry, the molecular. He had it all worked out. And it's not just life. He had all the universe with black holes and dark matter and dark energy and black holes and just all the stuff we're discovering. He had that all mapped out in the universe, and he had all these charts, right? The way I picture him, he's had all these marker boards, and he has it all written up all over the place. And he has this plan, and the plan would blow your mind. It's beyond any engineering feat we could ever imagine. And then when he's got it all set and he's ready, he says, okay, son. And he says, okay, let there be light. And there was light. And he just speaks it into existence, and all of this intricate plan gets put into place. And what I want you to see today is he's an intellect beyond all intellects. He's an engineer beyond all engineers. He's a thinker and a mind beyond all. He is the Word. He is this reason, this rationality, this profoundness that is lost on us. And I think that's why we struggle with our faith. It's because we don't really think of God big enough yet. We pigeonhole him and make him more like us than like God, who on 6 days can speak everything to existence out of nothing. It's incredible. But that's Jesus, and he spoke it into existence. And I want to look at the Word today. I want to look at this intellect. And what I want to do is I just want to show you a few things. Time is always a problem here. I just want to show you some signs of intelligent design. Because guess what? When God spoke everything into existence, what's left behind is this kind of fingerprint. It is this remainder, this reminder, and it points to him. And in his creation, he can be found. And what scientists are discovering by accident, often, is they're discovering God, and they're realizing, hold it, what we're believing is impossible because of this. And it points back to this intelligence that I want you to see today. So I'm just going to march through 4 of these things. Hopefully I'll have time for all 4. If we don't, we'll axe one at the end. But the first one I want you to get, and this is an old argument that goes way back. You've heard of maybe the watchmaker or whatever, but this is really catching steam thanks to a guy named Dr. Behe. And so he has taken this to a whole other level. He was a Darwinist in molecular biology who, doing molecular biology, discovered things as like, hold it, we can't explain this. And he actually became an intelligent design guy now, and he's flipped camps because he can't explain things any other way than that there's an engineer behind this. So I want to explore this idea so that you have it, so you're armed with this and you can explain it to your kids. So irreducible complexity, I know that's a fancy thing, but fancy phrase. But what does that mean? So irreducible means it can't get more simple than this. You can't get smaller than this, and complexity is parts, right? So you can't get fewer parts. So the most solid example of this that you've probably seen is this idea of a mousetrap. So let me just review this for everybody who's not heard this yet. So a mousetrap is an irreducibly complex system, meaning it only has 5 parts, and if you take one part away, it's no longer a mousetrap. It won't work. It's irreducibly, you can't reduce it any, you can't make it more simple than this. And if you take a part away, it no longer works. These 5 pieces are required to make it work. So you have a base, a platform. You got to have it to give it structure. You take the platform away, guess what? You got a bunch of wires, and that's it. It won't work. You aren't going to catch any mice with this. And you got to have this spring, and you got to have the hinge, and you got to have the hasp here. You have to have all 5 parts because it's irreducibly complex. Now, you can make this more fancy and put it in a house, but you don't need the house. This is the minimum bits you need for this to work. It's irreducibly complex. So think of it, what's the minimum I need for this to work? The problem with irreducibly complex systems is Darwin can't explain them. So let's just review what Darwin said. Darwin said everything, all of life is from accident, from chance point mutations. Not guided, there's no intelligence behind it. They're just random things that just happen because, hey, it just happens because that's what happens in DNA. And so you get a mutation here, and accidentally, it gives an enhancement. It makes life easier for that critter, and so it thrives more because of that mutation. And so it now, because of survival of the fittest, it now dominates. And then after another 100 years, by accident, another mutation, and it gives an enhancement. Well, irreducibly complex systems don't work till you get all the pieces in place. For Darwin to work, they have to work with one mutation. It's got to give you an enhancement after one. But these systems, you can't do that. You have to have 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces for that to work, and Darwinism can't explain this. So let me just give you a standard one that everybody should know, the bombardier beetle. Everybody know the bombardier? Anybody? I'm just curious. Am I covering old material? Just a couple of you. All right. So the bombardier beetle is so amazing. This just screams creation. And so the bombardier beetle, you might think this is an alien thing. It's not. It's a real thing. He actually shoots out 212-degree steam, right, out of this orifice on his backside to get rid of predators. And the way he does this is he makes hydrogen peroxide in one space. He makes hydroquinone in another space. And this is for the chemists in the room. We'll talk about chemistry later. Most people don't care. But he's making these chemicals separate, and then they're being stored in sacs, separate, because they will react over time. And then they're now excreted into this sphincter, this kind of thing that shoots them out with pressure as a spray. And also in this system, there's this very specialized enzyme that catalyzes the reaction between these two reagents, and it explodes. It basically shoots out this steam. It's very wet, and he has all this muscle back here to guide and direct this. And he basically turn it on a turret any which way he wants. And so he basically sprays steam in spiders' faces when they come to eat him. He sprays this steam, and it's mixed with benzoquinone for the chemists in the room. I had to finish it for you. So benzoquinone's the final reactant, the final thing that it makes, and it's like bleach. It's like getting chlorine in the eyes. So it's an irritant. It's also a poison. And so he sprays this hot stuff in the spider's face with this bleach kind of smelling thing. And the spider's like, oh, this is not fun. I'm going away. All right. Darwin can't explain this. Because think about this. Think about everything that has to take place in this system, this irreducibly complex system, for this to all work and give the benefit. If one thing's missing, it don't work. And all of it has to be in place. So, for instance, that creature has to evolve a cell line that makes hydrogen peroxide. Not only does it have to make hydrogen peroxide, but it has to encapsulate it, put it in lysosomes or something, and get it to the sac. And then, where did the sac come from? And then not only that, where did this, because it's all restricted and closed off because you can't get them together because there will be a reaction. It won't be as violent. And then you have to have the muscle system to squirt it out, the enzyme to catalyze it, and it all has to be coordinated. So there's these cells making the hydroquinone, the cells making the hydrogen peroxide, the system to get it stored, then all under pressure, and then the enzyme to catalyze it to get it to explode in the spider's face. How do you get that by evolution? Now, this is such a big problem. If you go out online right now with your kids and you'll see some videos on this. And this is how they avoid the problem. They'll pick one thing. Like the one I've seen is they'll pick the enzyme. And they'll say, well, this enzyme evolved from such and such. And they'll do some hand waving. They won't get any specifics or anything, how it could happen. But they'll just talk about one thing, and then they'll drop it. And they totally miss the point. The reason we talk about the bombardier beetle is not because one thing couldn't have evolved. The reason we use the bombardier beetle is because all of the things have to simultaneously evolve, and it has to be by accident, without intelligence behind it. So it just happened by, oh, look at this, some hydrogen peroxide. Oh, and look at this, some hydroquinone 100 years later. Oh, and look at this thing for holding it. And you have to have all of it come together, or there's no explosion. It's an irreducibly complex system. Now, there's hundreds of these, by the way. I just think this is the sexiest one. Because you get an explosion, you got chemistry going on, right? But we could talk about the eyeball. Your eye, the eye in your head, is an irreducibly complex system that all these pieces have to be in place for it to work at all. We could talk about the wings of birds. We talk about feathers and flight feathers and musculature and where it's placed on the birds and all of that stuff, the porous bones, so they could be light enough. All of it has to come together for flight. We could talk about, and I don't have time, but the giraffe. The giraffe's brain would explode drinking water if we didn't have this complex system of things all working together so that strong heart to push blood all the way to that roof, right? Up to that brain. Doesn't explode the brain when it brings it down to get water. It's just an engineering marvel. And all of these things have to work together or giraffes are dead. We could talk about the woodpecker. This is actually his tongue. If you never understand how woodpeckers, this is one of those great marvels. His tongue actually wraps completely around his head and cushions his head for blows with the beak. And then comes out incredibly long. It has barbs on the tip of his tongue. So that after he pokes a hole in the tree, battering the tree, his tongue can slip in and the barbs on the tongue get the maggots and the insects and brings them back in. And he's got a special cushion behind his beak so he doesn't give himself a concussion every time. And if you don't think that's a marvel, go up to a tree and try it once with your nose. It's absolutely amazing. You can look at all of these systems, and it's absolutely amazing. But the one I want you to see most, because I want to go back to Michael Behe, is nanotechnology in the cell, which has come about most recently. And the best way for you to hear about it is to watch a video. But it's a video about flagellum, on bacteria, and just watch this, and we'll talk about it in a minute.
In Darwin's Black Box in 1996, Behe spotlighted and made famous a number of really interesting discoveries that had been occurring in biochemistry and cell biology over the last 2 or 3 decades. And what biologists, molecular biologists, cell biologists, microbiologists have been discovering is that at the level of individual cells, there are little tiny examples of nanotechnology, little tiny machines at work. The flagellar motor is the one that Behe made most famous. It's a rotary engine that powers a whip-like tail, a protein tail that functions like a propeller, and it moves the bacterium through liquid, enabling the bacterium to essentially track down its food supply. And this little machine includes a rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, a U-joint, bushings, bearings, and a whip-like tail that functions like a propeller. And the machine in some bacterial systems turns at 100,000 RPMs in one direction and can reverse direction on a quarter of a turn and turn 100,000 RPM in the other direction.
Bacterial flagellum is a true nanomachine, about 40 nanometers in size. It's amazing. I mean, E. coli, Salmonella, which are kind of our model systems for the bacterial flagellum, can propel the cell about 20 lengths per second through a very viscous medium, like water, to these organisms. And you extrapolate that to human scale. 20 body lengths per second, 6-foot person, times 20, 120 feet per second. Mark Spitz or Phelps would be setting records with this type of propulsion.
It's hardwired into a signal transduction circuit that allows the bacterium to sense changes in the sugar gradient in the surrounding liquid.
This signal transduction system is actually a short-term memory system where the cell is, if it's going in the direction of an attractant, a nutrient that it can use to metabolize, it follows that chemical gradient. If it's a repellent, it will sense that and move in the opposite direction. So it's more than just this engine.
It's an extraordinary piece of nanotechnology. It's high tech in low life. And so just by spotlighting these extraordinary pieces of nanotechnology inside cells, and the flagellar motor wasn't the only one by any means, Behe, in a sense, opened up a window for people. He opened up the black box of the inner workings of the cell and said, look, this is much more complex than anything than anything that the early evolutionary biologists had envisioned. Darwin knew nothing of this type of nanotechnology in cells, and at the very least, we've got to come up with an explanation for this.
All right, so let me just recap a couple things. So we're talking about bacteria. So a single cell organism, one of the most simple single cell organisms there are, right? Single cell. And it has this propeller on it. And notice the technology that's built in and the capability that's there, the different proteins that all have to be expressed, all in a sense wired in. And what's interesting is it's engineered. Doesn't it look engineered? Doesn't it look like an engineer made that and drew it up? And it is in a single cell, so you cannot see this probably with your naked eye. I mean, it's so small. When they say nanotechnology, they mean small, right? And yet it functions at incredible speeds. How do you explain all of these parts having to be not only in the DNA code, but being expressed and being made at the right places so they can come together in the right shape and form and function in the right ways with the signals? Because we don't realize how complicated life is till we get small. There's a signal that turns it on and a signal that turns it off. And then he said there's nutrients. They have sensors that sense nutrients to turn it on, so it swims really fast to go eat that. And then he has also sensors that say, warning, predators, stay away, this is bad, to make it go the other direction. And you have all of this complex system coming together, and guess what? It don't work until all the parts are in place. And you can't explain it by evolution. It's absolutely astounding. And the smaller we get, the more marvelous it becomes. And so irreducibly complex systems is just this thorn in the side of their argument and their ideas because they can't explain them. And they point to a creator. They point to an engineer. So that's biology. That's one thing I wanted you to see is irreducible complexity. The next thing I want you to see is the information dilemma. And this is not now science. I love science, you know that. So we did biology and we threw some chemistry in. Now I want to talk about information technology because that's becoming huge. And it's one of the huge problems that Darwinism has is where did the information come from? All right, so let's think DNA for a second. Everybody familiar with DNA? I don't want to go really into it, but you understand that every cell of your body has like a center, a place, an administrative center called the nucleus. And in that nucleus is this data center for you. Now, it's so small you can't see it. I mean, if you looked at the sharpest point of a pin, it's smaller than that. It's very, 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 very tiny. And you're made of millions and millions of these cells, right? And in each one of these nucleuses is your DNA. You have 23 chromosomes made up of a language, made up of nucleotides. There are 4 of them, and they come in pairs. They match up, so they're called base pairs. You don't need to remember that for the test. But you have this code, and there's this language, and it's an alphabet. Think of it as an alphabet, but it's not like the English alphabet or Latin or Greek or any of that stuff. This is an alphabet, but it's a biological alphabet. And so you have basically the code, the program for you in every cell. So let me give you an idea how big that is. So there are 3 billion base pairs in every nucleus of your body. On your 23 chromosomes, there are 3 billion of those base pairs. So 3 billion letters making up your code. So just to give you a scope of that, if you like put that on in a way we could imagine, that is 1 million pages of code. They're like if you put it into a book and just put the code, A, C, G, whatever letter, whatever the 4 letters, and you put them in, it would take you 1 million pages to write out your code. You realize how big that is? So what I did to try to conceptualize that is I asked Google a question. I said, Google, what's the average size of a book published in America? And the answer that Google gave me was 200 to 400 pages. Okay, I'll buy that. A lot of my books I read are about 200 pages. All right. So I took the median of that and said, okay, let's say 300 because it's 200 to 400 right in the middle. Let's say we're going to use a 300-page book, and you just divide 1 million pages by 300. That is equivalent to 3,333 books of information, of 300-page books. Do you have that many books? I don't, and I love books. If you go in my office, I got bookcases filled with books. In fact, there's more books than bookcases. I can't fit them all on because I'm always reading another book and there's just no more space. But I have not read this many books. I don't have this many books. I got lots of books. In fact, I started doing some more figuring because I'm wondering how long would it take somebody to read 3,333 books? And I thought, lately, because of what I want to do here as a church and what I want to teach, I've been reading a book a week, which is faster than I want to read, but it's just what I need to do in the short term. So I don't normally do this, but I'm doing it now. And so if I kept that pace of 1 book a week, it would take me 60 years to get to 3,000 books. It'd take me a little over 64 years to get up to this number of books, reading a book a week. I don't know if you read a book a week. Maybe you read more than that. But to me, that's a lot of information. And think about the technology. You have 3,333 books of information in this tiny space, smaller than the tiniest point of a pin in every cell of your body. And God put together a system to replicate that, to make sure it gets handed off to every cell that gets made because you're constantly making new cells. And then he's made systems to say, oh, we need more of this protein or more of this enzyme. And he'll go exactly to that place in the DNA and he will replicate. He'll take that DNA and translate it to amino acids to make your protein. And boom, you got this now thing you need for your cell. And there's hundreds of those. Millions of the cells getting more and more complicated the more we study it. It's absolutely amazing. So the information technology makes information technology experts drool because it's so amazing. Because imagine if we could do that, reduce that kind of information to that small of a space, right? So anyway, that's not the part that's cool. That's just setting the stage for what's amazing. So where did the information come from? How did we get to 3,333 books in that tiny, tiny, tiny space? Well, the Darwinists say, well, it started out way smaller. It just started as a few DNA, nucleotides or whatever, and somehow there were enough of them that it could self-replicate. We don't want to get into that magic or anything. It's just a lot of hand-waving, but let's just grant that it's true. But then the point mutation will come, basically, which means a mistake, an accident. And that point mutation is going to give a benefit. And that point mutation is going to add information. So it's going to add, let's say, a paragraph to the book. And so you just had this maybe 1 page to start, but you get this mutation, you add a paragraph. And the next mutation adds a paragraph. And the next mutation adds a paragraph. And eventually, if you do that over millions of years, right, eventually you get to 3,333 books. That's what they say. Oh, okay. But is that what we see? Is that what DNA has now told us now that we've got into the DNA? And that's what's so cool, is we now, because of the Genome Project, we have sequenced the human genome, and we've gone beyond to other things, and so we're really looking into DNA and how it works. Well, how does it work? Well, let's just talk about our faithful friends. Because we know a lot about dogs, because we worked very hard to create the different breeds, right? Intelligent design went into making the breeds, the different breeds. We talked about the Chihuahua last week. This week, we're just going to break it down, and let's pick the pug down here this week. So we believe there's this ancestor. This is Darwinism again. When I say we as a culture, believe that there's this ancestral dog, wolf. And then from the wolves, people bred these things in different continents to get different breeds to eventually get where we are today, where we have our multiple breeds, including this little pug down here. And they say that if these point mutations, if we understand correctly, this pug should have more DNA, should have more information than this wolf because of point mutations, right? It should add. Well, what have we discovered when we actually get into the DNA, though? It doesn't add. Mutations don't add. Mutations subtract. Think of it this way. You can go from the wolf. You can go from the wolf to the pug, but you can't go from the pug to the wolf. Why? Because all the information's not there in the pug to get to the wolf. There's a loss of information to get to the pug. In fact, there's a loss of information to get to every one of these breeds. There's not a superior breed, DNA-wise. You actually have to lose information. You have to selectively remove it to get to here and more to get to here. So this critter here, this ancestor, has to have the most profound DNA of the lot, the most information. Does that make sense? So today, if we want to take these breeds and go back to the wolf, you'd have to intermix them all to get what this one had that this one doesn't have, and do all this intermixing to eventually get back to the wolf, and hopefully you get all the pieces you get back to the wolf, because they've been lost. They've been selected out. So what does this mean if this is the case? That means every organism, it could be canines, it could be cats, it could be elephants, whatever. It points back to an ancestor that had the fullest information. What do Darwinists want you to believe? That we're evolving to the fullest. And someday we'll be these superhumans, right? We'll have evolved and we'll get rid of cancer. We will have cured this and we would handle this because we will evolve and maybe become X-Men, right? And have superpowers is the idea. Because we're evolving. There's adding information. But that's not what it says. That's not what the science says. The science says that there was an ancestor, we call him Adam and Eve, who had the purest, wholest information. And since then, we've lost. And so we struggle. Haven't you noticed this? We struggle with disease. The farther we go, the more we struggle. Cancer, for instance. There's genes now you have to watch out for that cause breast cancer. Well, why did that gene come out? That's prevalent. A mutation. You're losing information. So don't buy the lie that we are becoming this great thing, because that's not what the science shows. The science shows we were this great thing, and we're incrementally losing information as we go. That's real. I know no superheroes that way. I get that it's depressing. That's why I stick with Spider-Man, because if Spider did that. Doesn't take mutation, right? So the point is all of this added paragraphs is a myth. It doesn't add paragraphs to the book. You can't add information by mutation. We actually lose it. Your body cannot make that thing anymore. It's lost. Or it makes it wrong, so it doesn't function like it should at optimal levels like God created it. Does that make sense? So you have this irreducible complexity, and then you have this data information dilemma that, hey, you have this pinnacle of every creature, every species, every kind that it seems to point back to. How did we get that pinnacle? How did we suddenly get all that information fully intact, pristine, beautiful like it should, unless there's a creator? And now it's decay since. That's the second argument. The third argument I want to give you is out of physics, because we're going to cover everything, right? I want to give everybody their thing, right? So physics, let's talk physics, and let's talk the fine-tuning problem, or the Goldilocks enigma. So it's called Goldilocks enigma because porridge is too hot, porridge is cold, too cold, but oh yeah, this porridge is just right. And it's the idea that in physics, the cosmos is just right for life. It's just right for life. Meaning there are factors, and I used to think there were only like 3 or 4 of these factors, but there are these factors out there that are tuned exactly. So there's a gravitational coefficient, for instance, as an example. And again, you don't memorize these will not be on the test. Strong nuclear forces, again, you just need to know that these terms exist. Electromagnetic force, the expansion coefficient of the universe, and the ratio of the mass of the proton to electron. There's all of these physics things, and if you've ever taken a physics class, maybe they sound more familiar to you. But there's a host of these things, and the most recent list I've seen has 209 of them. So there's not 1 or 2 of these things. There's 209 of these things, these coefficients, these physical facts that have to be in place for life to exist in the universe. So again, how does that work? Let me just use one. Everybody's heard of gravity, right? So let's just work on that one. So the coefficient of gravity is so finely tuned that just one click, I picture a knob on this dashboard of knobs where there's 209 of them. And so you go to this gravity knob, right? And you dial it. And if you move it one click to the left, you kind of turn it down just one notch, click. One notch lower, and all stars become red dwarfs and are too cold for life. Just one click. And I'll show you how small that click is in a minute. You go just one click higher, and all stars become blue dwarfs, and they burn too hot, and it's too brief for life. And how big are these clicks? 1 part in 10 to the 60th power. That's 60 zeros. That's why I did it this way instead of writing all those zeros, which would have been impressive in its own right. But there's 10 with 60 zeros after it. And you just take one of those digits away, and gravity don't work. Gravity won't give you life. We can't have life in the universe. Just one click. So, how big is that click? It's not 1%. It's not 0.1%. It's not even 0.01%. It's 0.01%. So when we say finely tuned, we're saying that somehow these coefficients and these physical factors in the cosmos are all balanced on a knife's edge. And if you go one click to the right, it falls off the knife. And if you do one click to the left, it falls off to the knife that way too. And all 209 are finely dialed into the perfect number so life can exist in the universe. What are the odds of that? Well, let's figure it out. Gravity, 60 zeros. Let's say the next one is 40 zeros. Let's say the next one after that is 33 zeros. You just add them together. That's the rule. See, we're getting everything today, math too. So you just add exponents, right? When you multiply, you add exponents. So you add 60 to 40 plus 30, and you add in all those numbers 209 times. And before you know it, you're getting up to 10 to like 1 million. The numbers are just through the roof, and they're impossible. You might as well say infinite. So you have 209 knobs, and all of them have to be finely tuned. And how do you know that you got it right for gravity? Well, if your intelligence, again, that implies your intelligence using the knobs. There wasn't. It was by chance. Darwin, right? In the beginning were the particles, and the particles created everything we saw. That's naturalism. That's materialism. How do you get 209 knobs to be exactly lined up in every factor exactly like you need for life? So you know how they solved this problem? The multiverse. This is, you know why you've been hearing the multiverse? It's because this is how they explain this problem. So the way they get around this dilemma is they say, well, there's just trillions upon trillions upon trillions of universes. And all these knobs are being set at random. And eventually you get one where all's set correctly. Now, where they're not portraying it right is like if you're watching your Marvel movies, and everyone, also actually Spider-Man, DC, right? No, he's Marvel. So you got all these multiverses and they all have life in them. But that's not the case. They're all wastelands. They're all empty. And only one has life. But you have to have an infinite number of these universes to get one that has life, which is kind of absurd. They can't solve the problem. And so let's just look at one guy. So Sir Fred Hoyle, he's the physicist that came up to explain carbon. So you are a carbon-based life form. So if you didn't know that, carbon-based chemistry, your organic chemistry, life is made out of carbon molecules. And so he's the one that discovered the ideal settings for the formation of carbon. And guess what? It's one of the factors that is finely tuned. And he was an atheist before he discovered this. And he did not stay an atheist. And so this is a quote from him after the fact, after discovering this thing in nature and in the cosmos. He says, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. There's no random stuff, meaning there always has to be intelligence, that this all screams intelligence. Just like the irreducible complexity says somebody had to put that together. The information technology, with the loss of information, that means there had to be somebody to put that together, wrote those books. And then now this one, all the fine tuning of the universe says, hey, somebody had to set those knobs who knew what they were doing for life to exist. All right, the last one I want to give you, because I want to satisfy everybody here, and some people aren't scientists or information technology people. Just think morality for a second, because this is one you can use with anybody, even if they're not a scientist. Why is it that everybody and their mother thinks it's wrong to rape a child? That's a morality argument. Where does that come from? Why? Let me give you an example. So Michael Roos is an atheist, and even him, right? He says, a man who says that it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. There's an atheist. He's admitting there's this morality to us. There's this conscience thing. Where does that conscience come from? How is it that we know it's wrong to rape a little child? Because think about this. Just extrapolate. If Darwinism is right, and there really is survival of the fittest, what kind of world would we be living in? It would be brutish, would it not? It would be, it's okay to exterminate the weaker. It'd be okay to take advantage of the weaker because you are the fittest and you're supposed to. That's what Darwin says. You're supposed to, right? You're supposed to thrive and flourish, and they're supposed to die out because that's what evolution is supposed to give you, the premier thing, and the weak should go and the strong should come. And so it's all about might makes right. And if we really lived in a world where that was the predominant theme, don't you think we would think that way? Wouldn't we live that way? Wouldn't it be just built in? It'd just naturally be a part of how we live life? But naturally, it's the opposite. Why? It's like somebody else with a greater morality wrote something in us, gave us something like maybe a conscience that says, that's wrong. Because how do you get it without a God? How do you get that by point, random, systematic, whatever, mutations? And get the survival of the fittest. You just don't. It's impossible. And there's a lot of things that way. Art, music, love. Why do we love? Why isn't it just carnal? Why isn't it just, if it's all about getting your DNA out there, why isn't it just like, I don't know, polygamy? Go out, get as many women pregnant as possible, and just walk away. Why is there more? Why? We can't explain these things unless there's a God. And so the bit that I really want you to see this day is that there's a lot of evidence that points to this intelligent design because God has left his fingerprints behind. And what he's made, he's given us these hints and these things that just point to him, that there's no other way of explaining reality unless there's an engineer. There's someone who gave it. And I'm just going to predict for you what's going to happen. So because of this, as Darwinism dies, it's slow death because it is dead. It has no evidence, and the evidence is mounting for intelligent design. So it will die. It might take 100 years, but it will die. It'll go the way of history. And as intelligent design ascends and more things point to this engineer, guess what's going to happen? Aliens. There will be this ascendancy of being seeded from outer space. There'll be this other, anything but God, right? But there'll be this growing trend, and you'll see it over the next 50 years. As you live your life, you'll see this trend towards, okay, something had to do this. And so some life form came and created this biome, or it's a biological experiment for this, or they're just seeding worlds and they're creating cultures or whatever. There will be this growing desire to still explain by intellectual, intelligent design, but without God. So that's what you'll see. They'll still try to explain it away, but one step at a time. First, we got to say, okay, Darwin's dead. And just let it die. Let it die. It's dead. Intelligent design reigns. And let's get there, and let's start doing experiments and discover more and more, and be smart about the questions we answer, and just the things we research to actually show this over and over and over. And then after that, it'll be, okay, who is this intelligence? And we'll have to fight that battle too, but one step at a time. Let's just get away from Darwin and get to intelligence first. And the thing to see is, wow, the intellect of God. To put all this stuff together. I recommend this. Take a microbiology class. Take something where you explore something in detail and depth and see the marvels. It's like, wow, this is incredible. Because God, he's incredible. And he made you, the Bible says fearfully and wonderfully. You are amazing. And you have 3,333 books to make you the unique person that you are. And God did that out of love. He made you you. He made you unique. And he had a plan for you. You're not an accident. Let's pray. Lord, we do praise you this morning. We thank you. We thank you for your love. We thank you for, wow, your brilliance. Lord, help us to realize how incredibly intellectual and just profound and how far beyond us you are. Help us to grasp the intellect it took to make what we see at the smallest details, and to marvel at your ability to do all these details in your head and think them through and make sure everything works. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. We are wonderful. Your works are wonderful. And Lord, all of it declares your glory. And Lord, we want to be in awe of you again. We want to be amazed by you. And Lord, help us to just worship you more and more profoundly and be just humbled and just amazed at your love, that you cared enough to make us. And make us so unique and special and put so much information into us, so much technology to give us life. Lord, help us to worship because of creation. And help us to be excited and have hope because of creation. Because there must be bigger plans. There must be more. A God who does things in this kind of detail doesn't leave other stuff to chance. And Lord, just help us to just be so encouraged and excited about having a God like you, having you on our side and having you in our lives. and having you be in charge of our future. And so bless us, grow our faith, and grow our love. And Lord, help us to spread the word. Help us to explain it to our kids. Help us to explain it to our friends. And Lord, we just ask that you put Darwin out of his ministry, out of his own misery, and just help us to see intelligent design more and more. And for those who need you, Lord, we just ask that you would work in their hearts. Lord, there's got to be somebody here who's looking, who's searching. And we just ask you would speak to them and you would reveal yourself and help them to see Christ and what Christ has done for them, dying on the cross so that they might find forgiveness and have life. And help them to realize that every one of us is a sinner and we all make mistakes, and that Jesus came to solve that problem. That we can reach out in a sense and just receive you as our Savior and find forgiveness and find life by living in your ways. And just help them to realize that and give up on the old ways and embrace your ways and find life. And just bless us, Lord, in that life. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to